Thank you very much. As Jack said, I've worked with CAS quite a bit, so some of the names in here are pretty familiar. I have a long list of people that I work with here at the university. This is not everyone, but quite a few people in my department in sociology and criminology, and also JD that's here today. And I'm going to talk about my background's heavily criminal justice. I got into GIS from an internship with the Illinois State Terrorism Intelligence Center. Kind of how it's morphed into what I do today is heavily practitioner oriented. But a lot of my work focuses on Little Rock, so if anyone's familiar with Little Rock, I'm going to throw them under the bus a lot today from multiple perspectives. But with that, we work actively with them now to try to change what's going on in communities in Little Rock. So with that, typically from a sociological perspective, we think about disadvantage and how that affects communities and what that relates to crime in communities. Little Rock, if no one's familiar with, in 2018 ranked 3rd for property crime and 7th for violent crime in the U.S. with cities over 100,000. So they're up there with Baltimore, Oakland, some of the big cities that we think about in the U.S. Little Rock's right up there with them. So with that, this is a traditional way from a sociological perspective. We have disadvantage, which is female head of household, percent unemployed, poverty level, population 15 to 24. So a lot of sociological measures that come from the ACS. And this is at the block group level. If you go down any further, the margins of error get incredibly crazy to work with. And that's even block group, you lose a lot of measures with that. But it kind of gives you an idea of crime in Little Rock and some of the disadvantage. With that, we do a lot of work with the city. Now we have an MOU, so a lot of the data that I get are with MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings, with cities for data sharing particularly. That helps out at the micro level, address level data. It's been instrumental in some of the work we have ongoing in Arkansas, but specifically Little Rock itself. But to give you some general concepts from my background in field, so we have a temporal heat map of shoplifting in Arkansas across about 98% of all agencies in Arkansas. This is publicly available data specific for shoplifting. I presented this at a loss prevention conference a couple weeks ago, but it shows a nice time of day, day of week temporal pattern to it. This is helpful from a crime analysis, crime prevention standpoint when you know pattern from a time element. We also have a repeat, near repeat, which is similar to a contagion model itself. Of once you have victimization, there's a heightened space and time part to that, then a distance and time decay after that, after you have an original event. So we use similar concepts of other fields. We just coin a different terminology for it. That's why I've liked this kind of presentation so far. I have a lot of the same ideas. From a criminal justice background, we just call it something else. But mostly what I'll be talking about today is what it comes down to: crime generators and tractors, items of the built environment. So a lot of our stores that we go to, bars, liquor stores, bus stops, we know parts of the environment are risky. We think about that when we go to cities. Where do I want to stay away from? How do we quantify that? So a lot of this data is publicly available. A lot of cities capture this in their licensing data. The Department of Sociology and Criminology here at UA partnered with Mike Thompson and the Ag Department. We purchased info group data from 1999 through 2018. We're getting 2019 here in a couple months. But it'll have historic address level business data as well as what census tract and everything that's part to. But typically from a crime perspective, we know these matter in terms of affecting crime occurrence. We also have what's called the 80-20 rule from other fields, Pareto principle. So a small segment or subtype of the facilities creates a lot more risk of crime. So within that, I keep clicking this like I have it plugged in, 20% of any one type of facility is going to attribute to 80 to 100% of all the crime or calls for service to a specific one. So it's not all bars are risky, but it's really about 20% of them account for most of the crime in any one jurisdiction. So quantifying that from a theoretical background, we have a crime kaleidoscope. So if you think about how the built environment comes together, you turn the kaleidoscope, the shards of glass change for a different crime outcome. So if it's robbery versus homicide, ag assault, even motor vehicle theft, the combination of factors change within that. A growing approach is called risk terrain modeling. So how you take all of these factors from the environment. Is it the proximity to one of them? Is it the density of any of them? How does that matter in relation to an outcome event? With that, the National Institute of Justice helped fund RTM, which is a software program that you can utilize now. With that, it quantifies some of the risk behind it. I'm not going to get into the statistics behind it. Gladly, we'll talk about it. We are kind of critiquing a lot of it now to advance science perspectives of it. But to get back to Little Rock, quick data that we got from them is a lot of crime data for gun incidents in 2016 and 2018. Disadvantage measures come from open source ACS data. The risk factors are city level data. They have a data portal now. Little Rock's one of the smart cities, one of the first 100 in the US. all this is usually publicly available data. Anyone can really do this. The city could do it. It's really they don't know how to, or they don't have the capacity or main power to do it within house. That's where we partner with them and go down there quite frequently now. So we take all this, we run a risk terrain model, and if you're interested in what streets you don't want to go on to in Little Rock, the red ones you don't want to go to, so it's a high relative risk of gun crime occurrence in Little Rock. I was there this past weekend. If you're familiar with Little Rock, the Dust Bowl bowling alley just had a shooting last night, and I was there Saturday bowling. So it was one of those things of I was walking in that space itself. It's close to the River Market area, but it has impact for that. Some of my other colleagues that are presenting at an upcoming conference are going into the neighborhood level effects of federal firearm licensing. We're also bringing in the informal how does guns move through arrest and stolen weapons and everything else from a sub-level. But we're looking at how that looks at. So it's this, we took this, aggregated it up to census block group and track to get a neighborhood risk of crime. We'll get into multi-level. For this project, it wasn't as important. But really, we're looking at the occurrence of social factors and the built environment. How do those come together to create risk at community levels? So block group. Then we have it tracked. And then with that, if anyone's familiar with the CDC 500 Cities study, Little Rock is one of the communities that has data available at the track level. So where we see high crime, high disadvantage, we also see high risk for physical health was not being good, and also mental health. So a lot of my research now is being pulled into more of a public health model. And since I have all those people named on the front end, these are some of the projects that we have going on in just Little Rock. The Terrorism Center here on campus, we're looking at spatial temporal patterns of domestic terrorism in the US, and then some random assortment of crime and just public health outcome at the end. I kind of do a bit of everything given who I've presented for, but that's kind of the nature of criminal justice. And with that, that is it.
Convergence research.
Yes, I love it. This is kind of where I geek out these kind of things.